In this video, I'm going to discuss to you about screen printing. What is screen printing? Screen printing was patented by an Englishman, Samuel Simon, in the Western world in 1907. Printmaking is one of the oldest art forms where an image is transferred from one surface to another. There are various methods of printmaking. One of these is silkscreen printing. The silkscreen printing technique makes use of a woven mesh to support an ink blocking stencil to acquire a desired image. The process involves using a stencil to apply ink onto another material, usually fabric, like the t-shirt, pouches, cups, or any material that can keep the image onto its surface. Before printing, the frame and the screen must undergo the pre-press process, in which an emulsion is scooped across the mesh, and the exposure unit burns away the unnecessary emulsion, leaving behind a clean area in the mesh with the identical shape as the desired image. The surface, commonly referred to as a pallet, and on which the substrate will be printed against, is coated with a wide pallet tape. This serves to protect the pallet from any unwanted ink leaking through the substrate and potentially staining the pallet or transferring unwanted ink onto the next substrate. Next, the screen and frame are lined with a tape. The type of tape used for this purpose often depends upon the ink used onto the substrate. Adhesive tapes are generally used for UV and water-based inks because they have lower viscosities. The last process in the pre-press stage is blocking out any unwanted pinholes in the emulsion. If these holes are left in the emulsion, the ink will continue through and will leave unwanted marks. To block out these holes, materials such as tapes, specialty emulsions, and blackout pins may be used effectively. The screen is placed atop a substrate. Ink is placed on top of the screen, and the flat bar is used to push the ink through the holes in the mesh. The operator begins with the fill bar at the rear of the screen and behind a reservoir of ink. The operator lifts the screen to prevent contact with the substrate, and then using a slight amount of downward force, pulls the fill bar to the front of the screen. This effectively fills the mesh openings with inks and moves the ink reservoir to the front of the screen. The operator then uses a squeegee to move the mesh down to the substrate and pushes the squeegee to the rear of the screen. The ink in the mesh opening is pumped or squeezed by capillary action to the substrate in a controlled and prescribed amount. The wet ink deposit is proportional to the thickness of the mesh and/or the stencil. As the squeegee moves downward to the rear of the screen, the tension of the mesh pulls the mesh up away from the substrate, leaving the ink upon the substrate surface.